I'm delighted to welcome you all to this consultation for the Global Education Monitoring GEM report for 2023, which will be focused on technology and education. This consultation is hosted by All Children Reading, a Grand Challenge for Development, which is a partnership with the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, World Vision, and the Australian government. My name is Christy Fellner, the Director of the Child Protection and Education team at World Vision, one of the founding partners of All Children Reading. We're thrilled that the 2023 report published by UNESCO will focus on technology and education and examining education challenges to which appropriate use of technology can offer solutions. Of course, with All Children Reading focused on testing and scaling the use of EdTech to advance early grade reading outcomes, this consultation will focus on how ICT or EdTech has or is being used and tested to increase reading outcomes for early grade learners in low resource contexts. This is a key moment to provide input into the early thinking of the GEM report on technology and education. We're glad each of you are here and look forward to your contribution to this consultation. Next slide, please. Before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. Please use the chat to introduce yourself, your organization, and where you're joining us from. We do ask that you mute your microphone until we get to the open discussion part of our presentation. And importantly, to notify you that by joining this event, you consent to being recorded and for the video and your contribution being shared publicly. Next slide, please. Today's program will be as follows. We'll begin with an overview of All Children Reading by Chief of Party Sergio Ramirez-Mena to familiarize our GEM report team to our Grand Challenge and each of your roles within that challenge. And although the rest of you are awardees, we hope you'll enjoy hearing some of the latest highlights. Directly following that, we'll have a presentation of the GEM report concept notes and spotlight report on basic education completion and foundational learning in Africa from Anna Cristina Dadio, Senior Policy Analyst or Thematic Lead, GEM Report, and Patrick Monjouridi, Senior Project Officer, GEM Report. Then Shelley Hartman-Sanya from our ACR Grand Challenge for Development Fund Management Group will share ACR GCD's response to that concept note. And finally, following that, we'll offer 2 breakout sessions where we'll hear from all of you. And finally, we'll have 5 minutes at the very end for any last Q&A you have for the GEM report. Let's begin with a short overview of All Children Reading. Sergio, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Sergio Ramirez. I'm the Chief of Party for All Children Reading, and I'm very pleased to be here. And I would like to especially thank Patrick and Anna and Laura from the UNESCO GEM report team for providing this opportunity. Our team here are All Children Reading, and more importantly, all our participants in our discussion today. Next slide, please. So I wanted just to give a brief overview of our work here at All Children Reading. And one of the things we wanted to share with you was what are the grand challenges? Grand challenges for development were created to mobilize governments, companies, foundations around important issues outside the procurement mechanisms that were there. Through this funding, USAID and public and private partners are bringing new voices to solve development problems, in this case, in education. To date, Grand Challenge partners have committed more than $530 million in grants and technical assistance to fund more than 786 innovations in 84 countries from areas like maternal health to alternatives for energy, and of course, reading, such as the All Children Reading Grand Challenge. Within the All Children Grand Challenge, we have conducted over 14 competitions in the past 10 years and provided 90 awards. To date, ACR is the only Grand Challenge that is focused on education with a specific focus on reading. So what is the All Children Reading Grand Challenge? As I said, this was the second Grand Challenge launched in 2011 in a partnership between USA, World Vision, US, and the Australian government. ACR advances ed tech innovation and research to support more than 584 million children who are globally right now not able to have basic reading skills. With these awards, ACR has awarded more than $25 million, out of which 35% of these awards have been dedicated specifically to children with disabilities, making ACR one of the largest innovation funds for inclusive education, among other qualifications. Next slide, please. So what do we do? At All Children Read, we do this by sourcing new solutions, testing new ideas, and then scaling those solutions that work. What does it mean? That we're seeking the most promising ed tech innovations and approaches to address the gaps and barriers to child literacy. Number two, we conduct research on these innovations to measure the impact that they have in learning, especially reading. And third, that those solutions that are proven to have impact, that we scale those solutions with the greatest potential to improve reading outcomes for all children, especially those most marginalized and in low resource contexts. Next slide, please. So what are the overarching impacts to date? First, in All Children Reading, more than 1,200 solvers have applied for funding. We have awarded in 49 countries to date. 92 innovators have been funded through the past 10 years. Currently, we have some of our awardees here, and we're working in 6 countries with most of the partners present here. Furthermore, we have more than 200,000 digital views of the content produced. We have to date produced books in 112 different underserved languages. And most importantly here, I think this is the key data is, as I said, we have a very strong interest in inclusive education, dedicating more than 35% of these funds to children, to applications and solutions for children with disabilities. Next slide, please. So how does, what brings us to the UNESCO GEM report, and how does All Children Reading address influence the EdTech space? Well, recognizing the technology can have a negative and positive effect, today we'll be focusing, as we know in this session, in 2 of the big education problems technology can address: improving quality of literacy with EdTech and providing equitable access, especially for children with disabilities. In this regard, let me take a minute and show, as you see here on the screen, how ACR is addressing some of these 2 questions, and that will be further discussed today. As we provide funding for applications, digital games that actually make reading interesting, we are very focused on high quality digital storybooks, because not every storybook is the same. So we want to make sure that the digital books that we produce meet those high standards. We capture evidence in reading outcomes. Every one of the awards, it goes through a rigorous monitoring evaluation process to measure the impact of those innovations. We have a very active, what we call collaborating, learning, and adapting agenda, CLA, with our awardees through peer-led cohorts. And finally, last but not least, within this first bullet, we do convening and engaging with key stakeholders, just like we are doing today with UNESCO's GEM report, to make sure that the work that we do, the work that our awardees who are here and those who are present is known throughout the EdTech space. On the second point, with respect to providing equitable access, especially for children with disabilities, we're very strong in producing local sign language books for children with disabilities, both for deaf and blind children. We built the capacity and the knowledge through a very interesting peer-led cohort using an online community, using a software called Slack. We're helping develop the minimum gold standards for sign language storybooks production, which is a vital tool for current and future publications that will address the gaps and the needs of children with disabilities who do not have access to reading materials. We're developing an inclusive assessment technical brief with the United Kingdom's FCBO department. This is focused on adaptive assessments so that all children can be counted. And we're hosting an accessible digital content workshop and promoting accessible materials. Just like our colleagues right now, we're connecting from Malawi at precisely one of these conferences. In conclusion, I'm very pleased that UNESCO Gen Report is focusing this year on technology and the challenges of education. The past 2 years have made the entire education community aware of the need to focus on two things. We need to close the gap in learning loss produced after 2 years of schools being closed, and how technology can narrow that, boost that learning, narrow that gap. And number two is we need to investing in 21st century solutions that make education systems and schools more resilient and to a changing world, not only in terms of pandemics or crisis, but also because you need new learning approaches that EdTech can be a very, very valuable tool, especially in learning and especially in reading. Thank you very much. As I said here at the bottom of the slide, every child must count, and that's our goal. I now hand it over to the Gen Report team for their presentation on the Council note. Thank you very much.
First of all, let me thank you, all Children Reading, a grand challenge for development, for co-hosting this presentation by the Global Education Monitoring Report on the concept note on the next 2023 Global Education Monitoring Report on Technology and Education, and all the participants to this consultation. So I am Anna Daddio. I'm a senior policy analyst and thematic lead of the team. And I'm going to present to you quickly the content of the next GEM report. But before doing that, I would like to briefly talk about what is the GEM report for those of you who may not be familiar with it. So first of all, the Global Education Monitoring Report is really the tool that has received the official mandate by the Education International Community to monitor progress of SDG 4, the Sustainable Development Goal of education within the Agenda 2030. We are an editorially independent team that is based at UNESCO. And the Global Education Monitoring Report in its current format exists as Global Education Monitoring Report since 2015, but it existed before since 2002 as Global Monitoring Report. And in 2015, as I was saying, is received an extended mandate with a monitoring part that was really the mandate to be the mechanism for monitoring and reporting on SDG 4 and on education in the other SDG. And then we have the thematic part that in each cycle is different, is the particular theme. It is the mandate of the GEM report in this respect is to report on the implementation of national and international strategies to help all relevant partners to account for their commitments in education. So in the next slide, you can see that as I was saying, since 2016, we have confronted different teams and dealt with different teams in the report. So education and the SDGs was in September 2016. So the first after the mandate obtained with the 2015 Incheon Declaration. Then we prepared the report about accountability in education. The following one, was about migration and displacement in education that we produced and launched in 2019. And then another one that is very important also for the discussion we are having today was about inclusion and education, with the message that really all learners matters, and each country would really need to widen the understanding of inclusion in education. Last year in December, we launched the non-state actors in education report, and we are now preparing the technology report that will be launched in June 2023, and the following one will be on leadership. So just to go back quickly on this, so the preparation of the next, the 2023 Global Education Monitoring Report on Technology and Education, for which this consultation is organized. So we have launched the concept note that you can find on the website of the JAM report. Laura, if you can share the note, it will be great, the link, so that also to have a background. So you in the concept note, there is, of course, the contextualization of technology and SDG 4, and the presentation of the role of technology and how COVID-19 pandemics has changed or transformed the face of EdTech intervention in education, really putting a spotlight on the fact that many countries moved almost overnight to the distance learning or remote online learning. And this has also highlighted many differences across countries in access to technology, in the preparedness of teachers to teach with online methods. It has addressed the digital divide. It has addressed differences of countries in terms of high technology or low technology. And we know very well, as the concept note highlights, that technology in education is something that divides, and very often is originates very heated debates about what should be the intervention doing, what really works in education, and if there are things that work, are they really thought with equity and inclusions in mind? So something that is really very important to say, and it's always present, and I would say that is really the core of our global education monitoring reports, the impact of these different interventions or the different themes that we deal with in the global education monitoring report are always analyzed with equity and inclusion in mind, and also with the lens of quality, that are really something that matters for all of our report, and maybe even more for this report on technology. So as the concept note make clears, the focus of the report will be really divided in two main parts. I'm speaking about the thematic part. Of course, there will be the monitoring part that will focus on the progress of SDG 4 and its 10 targets. But I'm speaking here about the thematic part, and the thematic part will look into how technology can help accessing education, but also learning, which is not the same thing, as we know, because access to education, having access to a classroom or having access to a book does not mean necessarily to learn. And this is something that also our inclusion report highlighted very, very strongly. And then what are the minimum conditions required for technology to support educations? And in looking at these different issues, we will take really a broad stance on technology, going beyond ICT. And so trying to focus on all this kind of technology interventions in educations that we can cover. And for the first part, as I was saying, the first part, what is the education we want? Can technology help? The report will look mainly into 5 big chunks, I would say. The first one that really matters for the discussion we have today concentrates on access and equity and inclusion, and consider in particular 2 perspectives. How technology can improve access, or which technology also can improve access to education for disadvantaged groups. And I will go a little bit into details in the next slides. And then the issue of how technology improve access to content that help then reaching more students, reaching more or in better ways, for instance, in other alternative formats. And I will also talk about that in a few minutes. And then the other big part of this first, I would say, section of the report will be about quality. And in the issue of quality, we will look at how technology improve the acquisition of basic skills. So basic skills, we can think about foundational learning. We talk about numeracy and literacy skills, but we go beyond that, because we will go beyond these skills also. And then we will look into the issue of digital skills, because as we know very well, the landscape of education has changed over time. We are not just talking about the COVID pandemic. We know very well that over time there have been deep changes in educations. So it is important to look into the skills that technology demands. And so this in particular call for looking at digital skills. And then another important part is how can education systems support technological development? And in this case, we will look at how technology is covered, for instance, into the curricula in education at different levels, but looking, for instance, at science and technology, and which is different from the digital content or the digital skills that we were seeing just now. And the final chapter of this part will look into the system, the management of education systems. So how technology can make assessment and other data more relevant and widely used. So for instance, here there will be the issue of school mapping, but also EMIS data set, how technology can change assessment, for instance, or has changed assessment. And so it's really looking into the system. And then the second part of the report will look really into what we call the minimum condition for all this to happen. Because of course, there are some conditions that needs to be met for technology to support education. First of all, access to technology. So we will explore the situation concerning looking at whether all learners have access to technology resources, which we know already the answer is negative, because the recent pandemic has already highlighted many inequality in accessing technology for education and for learning, but also accessing inequalities in the degree to which different groups can learn. And then there will be a chapter about governance of regulations. So our education system can protect learners from the risk of technology, for instance, looking into the issue of data privacy and but also how government set up in the ways to collaborate and coordinate interventions on EdTech in the different countries. The previous chapter, something that is very important to say, and you referred to in your presentation, Sergio, is about procurement. So it's not enough to say that is many countries have set up policies. We know very well, for accessing technology, we know very well that in many countries there are some sorts of very aggressive marketing strategies from EdTech companies. So how countries choose among these different possibilities, and how is the investment and procurement in these different technologies made. And then at last but not least, I would say there is the issue of teacher preparedness, which is very important. And this chapter will look at the degrees, the extent to which teachers are prepared to teach, to use and deal with technology. So coming back to the question that are really for the consultation today, there are two overarching questions. The first one is access to education for disadvantaged groups, and how can technology be used to provide education to all hard-to-reach learners, particularly learners with disability, but also remote learners, children in emergencies context, and girls, and access to content. How can more knowledge reach more learners in more attractive and cheaper formats, particularly through the use of free and open digital content, reducing the cost of content development and production while increasing quality, and using digital content like high quality accessible book production. So we will look at disadvantage in many respects, as you can see here. We will look at, the idea is really to look at low and high tech interventions that exist or can foster access to education for these groups and more groups that are relevant for the countries. And then you can see here some of the issues we would like to put on the table also today for discussion for students and with disabilities, the cost and benefits of using general versus assistive technologies, the challenges in implementation for underserved languages, example of technologies that support indigenous learners and refugees, for instance, to overcome language barriers in educations, or even what has been done during COVID-19 pandemic to ensure remote learning material was available for groups living in remote areas, or for groups with minority languages. And then there is something that is related in the presentation I have done to the quality part, but it's very important to have it in present for the discussion we are having today. And it is really related to numeracy and literacy skills. These two idea of use of education technology to support and train teachers to adopt and use effective pedagogical and teaching practices that lead to improvement in foundational literacy skills, and using EdTech to measure and improve reading and numerical outcomes for disadvantaged learners to make sure that they are not falling behind. And then the access to content, as I was saying, it's really about tools of access, dissemination, enhancement, replacement, and automation, technology and textbook innovation, open education movement and the obstacles, and the legal instruments also, or the international commitment that exists to make possible the transfer and the production of material that allows people, for instance, with disabilities, in the case of the Marrakesh Treaty, is really blind people or visual impairments, but other ways that exist to make sure that nobody is left behind. And so in this, for this case, we will look at technology as a tool for access, dissemination and enhancement, issue of open educational resources, and as I was saying, technology and textbook innovation and accessibility. So just to conclude and leave the floor to my colleague Patrick, the idea of this consultation is really to have you and the participants, everyone, to invest in this discussion by, for instance, recommend evidence-based practical example on the effects of implementing education technology interventions, practical example on the challenges of implementing education technology interventions, policies, example of policies, legislation, technology financing based on national experiences. All these questions and examples, evidence-based example that you will provide to us will be linked to the two question of access to education for disadvantaged. So how technology can foster and improve access to education for disadvantaged learners, and the issue of access to content. We are also preparing a profile of education, enhancing education review on technology and education. But so every theme that you think we should cover on technology in education will be really helpful for us. And with this, I thank you and leave the floor to my colleague, Patrick. Patrick.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you very much to the All Children Reading Grand Challenge for giving us this opportunity to be connected to such a talented and exciting crowd. I'll be short. I'll briefly introduce the Spotlight report, also because some of the questions are very related to the ones that Anna has introduced already, but that will give you a bit more context on what we're doing with the Spotlight series. So the Spotlight series forms part of an approach by the GEM report to strengthen the connection with regional and local research and agenda. And before the Spotlight series, we had 3 other regional reports that paved the way, that you can find on our website for the first 2. So the first one was on Arab states, migration and displacement in 2019, and the second one was on Latin America and inclusive education or inclusion in 2020. And soon there will be the third one on South Asia and non-state actors. The Spotlight series, for its part, focuses on Africa and addresses issues that pertain to access, completion, and foundational literacy and numeracy. So we're doing this because the region is home to the largest number of out-of-school children, with 1 in 5 primary school-age children who are out of school in the region. And when they are in school, they either drop out, only 1 in 3 complete primary education, or they have difficulties to learn with only 1 in 5 achieving minimum proficiency in reading or mathematics. And these issues exacerbate equity issues overall, as those who are more likely to be out of school, drop out, or not learning are often those who are already excluded and form parts of the most vulnerable population. It also talks to the efficiency of education systems, where a lot is invested, but there are little results that follow. And eventually, it jeopardizes any further skills acquisition that are needed for the remainder of the SDG 4 agenda that was introduced by Anna. So if we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. The Spotlight series is is a partnership between the GEM report and ADEA, where we combine our political and technical strengths to foster regional dialogue. It also helps to connect regional and international agenda by including discussion on the SDG 4 benchmarks on out-of-school rates, completion rate, and foundational learnings that countries in the regions have committed to reach by 2025 and 2030. The cycles that we have envisaged so far is like 3 one-year cycles, where in each cycle we have a selection of 12 countries, 5 of which are looked at in depth. And for each of these countries, we will publish country reports by the end of the year. And in the middle of the year, we are publishing a continental report, which uses the country reports as the mechanism to feed a more regional discussion, and eventually to feed a discussion at the regional level with the African Union. For the 2022 cycle, so the upcoming report, we have Ghana, Senegal, DRC, Rwanda, and Mozambique. We try to have at least one country in each region, so North, West, Central, East, and South. This year, we did not manage to secure a country in the North, but next year we will have Mauritania as part of the representing the northern part of Africa, then Niger in the west, Angola for Central Africa, Uganda in the east, and Zambia and South Africa in the south. And we also have a number of country cases. For instance, this year we have a case study on school feeding in Madagascar, early childhood in Sao Tome and Principe, teaching and learning material in Malawi, or learning assessment in Sierra Leone. For the analysis, if we can move on to the next slide, thank you very much. For the analysis, we're using an analytical framework that was developed for the Spotlight series, where we look at 7 factors that have been identified as essential in systems approach to improve foundational literacy and numeracy. So these are whether there exists a vision in the education strategy, national strategy, that is focusing on improving literacy and numeracy, whether teaching and learning methods are actually aligned with that vision. So whether the curriculum is putting the right focus on literacy and numeracy, whether teachers are adequately supported to realize this vision and contribute to the achievement of improving foundational literacy and numeracy, whether schools are adequately managed and resourced to support teachers and the pupils in the learning experience, whether there is enough monitoring and quality assurance of what's happening in the system so that actions can be taken when needed, how community and parents are engaged with the learning process, which is one of the factors that's often very neglected, and where technology can also contribute substantially. So that's a very important aspect for us. And finally, whether learning is assessed. So we're looking at we're using data and evidence on access, quality learning, equity, and finance to basically discuss challenges and best practices for policy intervention that would foster foundational literacy and numeracy. And so that's basically in a nutshell what we have. And the questions are very similar to what you might find or to what you have heard from Anna, with the some particularities for the African region, where you have a very specific set of conditions with high level of multilingualism or linguistic diversity, much lower resources and infrastructures, and lower exposure to and penetration of technology. For instance, if there are projects that seek to introduce technology to improve teaching practices, there's this double challenge of introducing both new pedagogical practices and new technologies that teachers might not be used to engage with. So we're very much interested on how this has been done in the region or elsewhere, and that could be applied to the region. But also developing materials to teach and learn in in English, for instance, which is where most of the research come from, is very different from developing teaching and learning material in, say, Wolof or Xhosa. And we're very much keen on learning more about examples of project cycles that looked into cognitive and learning theories and brought that to classroom practices in order to improve literacy in some of these languages that might not be as common as English or French, and how do these processes actually integrated local knowledge and approach to technology. I will stop here, and of course I will be around if there are questions around the spotlight.
Just moving us into ACR's response to the concept note, and just wanting to frame some of the backgrounds that ACR can provide as a whole before we go into breakouts. But we definitely want to prioritize the breakout group discussions because we're so excited to have our awardees and alumni here. It's so nice to see your names on the screen and be connected again. So I will just very quickly go through our responses to the concept note, and then we'll start breakout groups in about 10 minutes. So as you all know, with 584 million children globally who do not have basic reading skills, which is 100 million more than before the pandemic and many more than before we started All Children Reading, a Grand Challenge for Development, we know that EdTech supported approaches to strengthen learning are needed now more than ever. And we also know that at even greater risk are children with disabilities, for whom books, if available at all, are typically not available in accessible formats like Braille, audio, and sign language. Of the estimated 34 million children globally who are deaf, more than 80% do not have access to any type of formal education, and less than 2% receive education in sign language. And I'm so glad that we have our colleagues from RIT here. Welcome. Thank you for joining in, for all of the work that you guys are doing to build sign language content for those children. As you know, over the past 10 years, All Children Reading has tested many promising applications of education technology to support language and literacy for these children. Through testing, our innovators have learned what works and what doesn't to improve access, equity, and inclusion. And most importantly, that means thinking beyond the EdTech solution itself to include the appropriate training, needs assessment, screening, infrastructure, devices, coaching and monitoring support, and advocacy and ecosystem engagement necessary to really ensure that EdTech is supporting children's learning needs, especially as they go to scale in any sustainable way. So if we go on to the next slide, you'll see the research questions that we're focusing on with this consultation. And the first one is, what do we know about the role of technology in addressing education challenges for access, equity, and inclusion? We wanted to highlight some of ACR GCD's higher level research. And we know that some more of the solution-specific evidence will be shared by our awardees in the breakout groups. So next slide. The first piece we wanted to share is the EdTech Summative Report from our round 2 awardees. It's been widely cited and highlights important findings that EdTech-based literacy projects can offer beneficial, individualized learning experiences for children, and that technology has the capacity to capture individual user experiences, such as content access, exposure amounts, quiz and question responses, progression through difficulty levels. And this data can really help our innovators strengthen project design and also better understand how user experiences correlate to reading outcomes. One example of that is the Bloom Reader developed by our colleagues from SIL who are here today, which is scaling to support children with disabilities through the YUMI Read Together project in some of the most remote provinces in Papua New Guinea. It was previously used by Save the Children in the RISE project in Papua New Guinea, and improvements in reading scores were seen at more than 7%. So if you go on to the next slide, for disadvantaged groups, EdTech can really provide education to hard to reach learners. If you go on to the next slide, you'll see in ACR GCD's summative report on EdTech for children with disabilities, specifically children who are blind or low vision, it really highlights the importance of holistic approaches to using EdTech to support learners with disabilities. So our awardee resources for the blind approach was really exemplary, and I see Ami on here, so you can talk more about that. They engaged learners with disabilities through a combined targeted approach to using assistive technology, providing technical support to the people using that assistive technology, providing parental awareness training and advocacy to the government. That really resulted in high-level reading outcomes. Examples of the assistive technology that supported children throughout these projects included Jotadot portable braillers, desktop computers loaded with Zoom text software, and magnifying CCTVs that enabled children to read large print text, as well as Daisy players. And so in the Bookshare India projects, students used Daisy players and reported high levels of comfort with the technology and also high levels of engagement in the project. So going on to the next slide, we have a bit of information on how we've seen EdTech support children in emergencies, as well as children in remote settings. Technology can really be a bridge to the formal school system, as we all saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also in refugee and migration crises recently. We've seen technology support Syrian refugee children. We've seen parents empowered to use free and open source books and learning games like Feed the Monster, the Global Digital Library, and Little Thinking Minds QSAS app. We've seen improved literacy outcomes and psychosocial well-being. We've also seen even more profound effects through the World Bank's DIME impact evaluation in Northern Nigeria, which our colleagues from Curious Learning are here and can share more about later. And we've really recognized that public licensing of the Feed the Monster and the Enter and the Letters apps enabled them to be adapted into more than 50 languages with over 600,000 current users. So enabling lots of adaptation for the languages that children in our context are using. So moving us on to the next slide, just wanted to speak for a moment about how EdTech can support girls. We've found that EdTech can be an equalizer for access to literacy, particularly for girls who are in marginalized contexts. Beginning with the content development phase, for example, girl protagonists must be included in books, and excellent examples can really be found in the collection of books that Asafir Education Technologies produced for All Children Reading, which is 100 open source digital STEM books in English and Arabic. They're on the Global Digital Library, and they feature, many of them feature girl protagonists. So if we go on to the next slide, moving into kind of our next sub-question around assessments and how can we make assessments and other education management data more relevant and widely used. So just focusing on one small piece of this, ACR GCD really feels that inclusive assessments are essential to ensuring the most marginalized are assessed and included in learning opportunities. However, the World Bank reports that learners with disabilities are typically excluded from assessments, especially in low-income contexts. We've seen thousands of children with disabilities in the Philippines, India, Lesotho, Nepal demonstrate their true aptitude and achievement levels when they were just allowed the accommodations during assessments that enabled them to access content. So if you go on to the next slide, you can see that children who used Braille materials in the Reading Beyond Sight project in the Philippines had significantly higher gains on all 5 subtasks in the table on the next slide, as compared to their comparison group peers on both the Filipino and the English EGRAs. So we were just thrilled to see that and are continuing that work in our current projects. Our colleagues from World Education in Nepal are on here. We just finished implementing an adapted EGRA there and piloted some new subtasks for Nepali Sign Language vocabulary. Also, moving on to the next slide, just wanted to move us into the question that's going to be relevant to our second breakout group, which are examples of how EdTech can solve problems with access to content and how we can reach learners with more attractive content in cheaper formats. So ACR really believes that key to cost-effective and scalable EdTech solutions is content created under open licenses that permit no-cost access, use, resharing, adaptation, and redistribution by anyone with no or limited restrictions. You'll hear a lot more about those examples from our awardees during the great breakout groups, specifically in reducing costs. Using resources like our awardee eKitabu's EPUB toolkit, adapting existing books from the Global Digital Library, for example. Publisher production costs for accessible EPUBs are rapidly decreasing. Features like text highlighting, audio, eBraille, large print, and sign language video in books can ensure that children with disabilities have the same opportunities to participate in education as their peers. And creating born accessible books is not only more efficient and cost effective as compared to retroactively adapting books, but it can also help publishers and writers think more inclusively about children's needs from the beginning. So on the next slide, I just wanted to highlight the minimum and gold standards that ACR GCD is currently developing in partnership with our sign language storybook cohorts. We've really seen digital education platforms much more widely used since the COVID-19 pandemic. And our awardees recognized that guidelines were necessary to ensure the development and production of high quality sign language storybooks. The awardees are working together to establish minimum standards for those sign language storybooks, and then really what a gold standard would be in the highest quality format with the smallest file size that could be accessed by anyone in any context, even with low bandwidth. And lastly, on the last slide, I just wanted to highlight what it really takes to get free and open content used. This is ACR GCD's current focus, and we're really trying to understand how EdTech solutions and especially digital accessible books get used. We're paying particular attention to distribution strategies, device availability, training that users, including teachers and parents, need to use digital books both at home and in the classroom. And I have an example here on the screen from our awardee, the Asia Foundation. They've produced 437 books in 6 languages, including Nepali Sign Language. And they have an amazing campaign on Facebook, which they engage parents and teachers and actively promote their books along with activities to use the books for parents and teachers to use the books with their children. And they have more than 100,000 views and growing of those books, which is exponentially more than we expected and than we've seen from others. And we are so excited to learn from their approach. And we recognize that there are many more ways that technology can help address these challenges. We also recognize that technology can contribute to digital divides, as Ana Cristina mentioned, and we look forward to a rich discussion on both of those topics in the breakout groups. So thanks everybody, and I'll turn it over to Michelle to get us moved into our groups.
Thank you, Shelley. If you want to move to the next slide. Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Ootman, Program Manager for Events for All Children Reading Fund Management Group. We've now come to the time to hear from you. As mentioned in the invitation, this consultation will focus on just one of the research questions. And that question is, what do we know about the role of technology in addressing each of the education challenges identified with respect to access, equity, and inclusion? To hear your feedback, we'll have 2 breakout options for you. And as you think about your potential contribution to these discussions, please keep in mind that preferred responses to this consultation are those of examples or practice supported by evidence. So here's the 2 breakout options we have. Breakout number 1 will focus on answering this question as it relates to disadvantaged groups. So the question of how can we provide education to all hard to reach learners, including learners with disabilities and special education needs, remote populations, education in emergencies, and girls. If you would like to join that discussion, you will just stay in this current session. Importantly, this breakout will be the only one that provides English transcriptions or that will be available. So when the prompt comes up on your screen shortly to join a breakout, if you want to be in that group, please just ignore that breakout or that prompt and stay where you are. We'll have the second breakout, which will focus on answering this question as it relates to access to content. How can more knowledge reach more learners in more attractive and cheaper formats, like high quality, accessible book production, free and open digital content, reducing costs of content development and production, and using digital content? So as you probably notice, we're running a little bit late. So we're going to let these breakout groups run a little bit later, all the way till about 35 minutes past the hour. So that we'll have about 35 minutes for this discussion, because this is the rich part where we really want to hear from you, and the GEM report team really wants to hear from you. And then we'll come back for just a little bit of Q&A, but we ask that you may want to start sending your questions for the GEM report team in the chat to help you get those answered, since we're going to have an abbreviated Q&A time. So Valerie, if you would please put up the breakout group invitation, but just to repeat, if you want to join the discussion on disadvantaged groups, ignore this prompt and just stay where you are. But if you want to join the breakout on access to content, please click the button to join that group.
A lot. Okay, so hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to the breakout room 1, which is on access to disadvantaged groups. We're really excited to hear all your contributions, your thoughts on these points of discussion that we're going to share again on our screen in just a sec. I'm just going to very briefly introduce myself. My name is Maria Rafaela. I am a research consultant working at the GM report, specifically on the chapter on access to disadvantaged groups. And I'll be moderating this discussion with my colleague Chadni, which is just going to introduce herself now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chandni, and I'm working for the GEM report as well, along with the rest of the team. For the 2023 Global Report on Technology, I will be working on the section on quality, as Anna described earlier, looking at how technology can be used to improve basic skills such as reading and numeracy in early grade learners, as well as older learners that arrive in school with pre-existing learning gaps. Without further ado, we would just like to say that we would allocate about 2 to 3 minutes of speaking time per person to allow everyone to speak. And before you start to speak, please introduce yourself so that we know who's joining and from where. Maria Rafaela will now share the questions with you.
Okay, so these are, like Anna described before, and she briefly explained, in this breakout room, we're mainly going to be focusing on 3 areas. And just to explain that these 3 areas that you see here, which are students with disabilities, underserved languages, and foundational learning and numeracy, have been chosen based on 3 very relevant focus areas of all children reading. So as you can see, we will first be focusing on students with disabilities, looking at discussing and hearing from you about the cost and benefits of the use of general versus assistive technologies. Also very interested in challenges in implementing and popularizing these technology, and specifically in low resource contexts. We'd be very interested to hear specific country examples you might have for this, implementation challenges. And then we're moving on to underserved languages. We're going to be looking at examples and discussing, hearing from you on some examples of technology supporting Indigenous learners and refugees to overcome some language barriers in education, and also the use of technology in low resource contexts during the COVID-19 pandemic to ensure remote learning material was available in local and or minority languages. And of course, we can also touch on students with disabilities here as well, on making sure that the content was available for students with disabilities and learning difficulties, because as we know, in many cases, this wasn't the case, unfortunately. So Chandni is going to move on to presenting the 3rd area that we will be discussing.
Keeping in mind the relevance to all children reading's work, for foundational learning and numeracy, we have selected 2 subcategories of questions. The first question, as Patrick described, that will be explored more deeply in the Spotlight report, will focus on the use of technology to support teachers and to support innovative pedagogical practices. And the second question is more from the perspective of impact. So how technology can be used to improve reading and learning outcomes for early grade learners. It would be great if you could share evidence of best practices, other evidence-based solutions, and any challenges that you have remarked, and how these solutions can or cannot be scaled up, as well as anything else that you would like to highlight. We would like to say that we have about 7 minutes per category of question. So please feel free to start speaking already. And if you want, you can raise your hands up using the Zoom icon. So the floor is all yours. Is there anybody who would like to start speaking and share their thoughts on any of these questions?
I'll just stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other as well.
Perfect.
So the first question is, area of discussion is on students with disabilities. So we'd love to hear any thoughts you'd have. Also feel free, of course, to share in the chat any resources you might have that might be useful for us, anything that you have to discuss.
I see someone has raised their hands.
Yeah.
Please go ahead, Rumya.
Yeah, this is Dr. Rumya from the Benedict team based out of India. And I'd like to start with specific ideas for persons with print disabilities. We don't cover all disabilities, we talk about print disabilities. And this would include almost 10% of any given population. That would include blindness, low vision, learning disabilities such as dyslexia, orthopedically challenged people who cannot hold or turn a page of a printed book. All these would be termed as print disabled. So talking about solutions about how do we include these children or these students into mainstream inclusive systems. And the best tools that we have been able to implement in India and some developing countries around us is using the power of the technology, which is almost there in everybody's hand, and that's the Android device. So with introducing the Android device in the hands of the student, we are, number one, making content inclusive for everyone. Why? Because people with normal sight will be able to see the same content. People with visual impairment will be able to hear the same content using text-to-speech engines on the Android device. Once you have this in place, the Android device also serves in multiple ways, not just for reading, but it also serves as a writing device. If you combine that with a simple USB keyboard, your device becomes a writing device. So you're not just talking about a reading capability, we are also encouraging children to write. Other tools that can be encouraged to work with the Android device, for especially for content, concept building, you can add tactile materials that the blind child can feel to build his concept of ideas, which is being taught in a mainstream inclusive environment. Assessment of the child can be done very similarly to any other non-disabled child, because now this child will be able to read and write in the mainstream script that the teacher will be able to understand. So teacher does not have to learn Braille or any other spatial language, which generally is not available in mainstream inclusive schools. Type of content, any language which is supported by a screen reader should be able to be used by the Android device, and there are more than 70 odd languages which are supported by screen readers, by text-to-speech engines in various languages. Content development is also extremely simple because you do not have to remodify the content into spatial formats like Braille. It's extremely economical to pick up any printed text and convert it into digital formats using standard conversion techniques, or if we can encourage publishers of digital content to create contents in a format that is born accessible, which was discussed as part of what Shelley described. This then creates an environment where you don't have to depend on others to recreate format for you. It's already there in the digital space. You pick up any content from the Android device and you are able to read and write. I'm just summarizing at a very high level as to what can be done. Price-wise, your Android devices would cost you about $100 per device, and then you don't have to give every child a new device every year, as in case of Braille content, because you have to print these books and bring it back to the child. Delivery is an issue over there. Bulk is an issue with Braille books because they are very heavy, bulky, all that stuff is taken care of. You can access any content from anywhere in the world. That is another advantage, especially with COVID experiences. More and more children have started using digital content, and with visually impaired children sitting remotely, you can still work with them using these methods. I'm open for any questions from any of the participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those very interesting and useful comments. Does anyone have anything to add to that, to comment, also ask any question?
Can I ask one?
Yes,
Dr. Homyar, does Benetech have any other evaluation reports or studies that you guys have done on the work that you're doing, either in India or more broadly? I know we have the report from your Bookshare India project, but didn't know if you had any other.
Yes, Shirley, the report that you're mentioning is a very old one. That project happened in 2012-13 from memory, if it serves me right. And during those times, the text-to-speech engines were not as developed as they are today. In the last 5 years, there have been exponential growth in the quality and the number of text-to-speech engines available per language. So today, we definitely have many more options. And in terms of reports, we are currently under a 3-year program funded by Level, and we are working with schools for the blind in India. There are about 18 schools that we are piloted with, wherein we are transforming the complete ecosystem from traditional to digital education. So that would also include teacher mentoring. We also go in and train the teachers in using simple Android devices, which they're very comfortable with in the first place, but still we go in and help them progress a little further as to how to use these devices on a day-to-day basis in the classroom. We also go in and work with the students as well as the parents groups, making them understand that just reading Braille is not going to help your child in the future, because you can only read whatever is there in Braille, but you cannot print anything in Braille and bring it to your child because that's very expensive. So if you start using digital means to read, your child gets better options. And even in the future, he can pick up subjects like STEM, and which opens up more career options for your child. The child can then move into non-traditional areas of employment. As we can see, there are so many other options when it comes to employability of a child with digital skills. So all this will in turn keep on rolling one after the other if we start at the base with digital inclusion of the child using technology.
Thank you very much, both of your answers and questions. I noticed that Jane Myers, sorry if I'm pronouncing any name incorrectly, had her hand up before. I'm not sure if you still want to add something or comment something. Go ahead, please. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was very happy to hear the last comment and also to be able to attend the program last Wednesday that Benetech gave on and hi, Ayan, and congratulations, because our organization is very much looking into all of the possibilities for serving blind and visually impaired children who come to the public libraries that we create in Zambia. And I guess I just wanted to say our little role in all of this environment is that we are able to reach the most disadvantaged young people, ones who are out of school. And I think that's a really important thing for the GEM report to consider, et cetera, that focusing just on schools, whether they're the most inclusive schools in the whole world, they very much still are not including the people who need the most. And so we see the libraries that we are building starting in Zambia and the model of this as a platform for being able to use both print and technological resources to try to help reach disadvantaged children. We've for a long time had sign language story time in our libraries run by human beings. There are certainly technological ways to expand that, but our focus right now is the importance of human interaction and human mentors in trying to make all of these resources accessible. Anyway, we have funding for 3 libraries now coming up from USAID's American Schools and Hospitals Abroad program to obtain resources to help blind children. And we are planning to purchase a lot of good Braille printed books with the pictures behind them, et cetera, that can be used by in many ways. But I was really, really interested, and having checked even with the Washington, D.C. public libraries, all of the past technological solutions that they have gone through over the years, they kind of said really did not work, and they pulled out an Android phone and said, this is what we here in Washington, D.C. see as something useful for visually impaired library users. So I was planning to, as soon as finishing up a proposal, planning to just dive into Benetech and find out. So I'm really happy to know more about the cost of the Android devices. What we would envision doing is actually purchasing a number of these devices, training our staff to use them, and then teachers can come to these libraries and also learn learn how to use them, as the last speaker was just saying, was important. So that's my contribution. Thanks.
Thanks, Jane. This is Dr. Homier again from Benedict, and thanks for supporting my case. And we'd be more than happy to support Zambia, as we do across the African subcontinent. Please get in touch with us. I'll just put my email in the chat, and you could just reach out to us anytime.
Ian knows how to reach me. We're in walking distance, actually.
Oh, wonderful. Since Anne is there, that's great. Anne.
I'll make the introduction, and thanks, Jane. Thanks, Amir.
I have a question for Homier, if I may go ahead, Maya Faila.
Yes, please.
Dr. Homier, I just wanted to ask you if you've experienced any sort of challenges in the uptake of technology. So when you're interacting with stakeholders such as parents and caregivers, as well as teachers, has there been any resistance to using technology versus more traditional methods for disabled, especially able children?
Very important question. And the challenge is always from the teachers. Sad to say this. The students are extremely enthusiastic about learning new technology. They're super fast in learning technology. It's the teachers, especially the old timers, who have for their entire life used a particular way of teaching students. They find it extremely difficult to change their teaching methodology, to accept this new, very versatile way of teaching. That's the biggest challenge. The other challenge would be device acquisition. Fortunately, in India, with the very high Android penetration, even in rural communities, that's not too big a challenge. And then there are lots of philanthropists and lots of organizations who have now seen the advantage and are donating Android devices compared to other devices such as Daisy, audio players, and all those stuff which were used in the past. In fact, the cost of a Daisy player is more than an Android device, if you look at it from an Indian perspective. Printing of Braille books also, if we can equate the price of printing compared to purchasing an Android device, was Jane was asking, to print one set of textbooks for one child for 1 year is equivalent to purchasing an Android device in India, especially. So that means when you have printed one set of books, instead of that, you give that child one Android device, and that is going to serve him for at least 3 to 4 years if he doesn't break it. Similarly, on the other side, if you want to only go for hard Braille, every year you have to invest in procuring all the Braille books, delivering those bulky Braille books to the child at the regional level. It is very, very difficult. Printing Braille is very tedious. It's very fragile. We all know lots of limitations are there. Images cannot be printed in Braille very easily. If you start printing images, the cost goes exponentially higher. And then after all this, you just have one set of textbooks. When you have an Android device, you can access millions of books. There's endless possibilities of what you can access and what you can read and what you can write. You can communicate with people. You can use the rest of the power of the Android device. So there are plenty of advantages. I can go on and on for the rest of the session. Does that answer your question, Charlie?
Yes, thank you so much, Tomia.
Yes, thanks a lot. Does anyone have anything else to add here or to comment in this discussion, or we can move on to the next section, just giving a few seconds in case someone else has something to add. Okay, if no one else has something to add, thank you again very much for all of your contributions so far. We can move on to the next section, which will be discussing underserved languages. Specifically, if you have any examples of technology supporting Indigenous learners or refugees to overcome their massive barriers in education. And also with COVID as well, we'd love to hear if you have any thoughts or about what happened there with minority languages, how technology helped in low resource contexts to ensure remote learning material was accessible.
Let me just I know that our colleagues from Igitabu and Bookshare have plenty of experience on that subject, but just let me say that it is, the advantage of digital technologies and ed tech in the addressing underserved languages is impressive. Why? Because we are able to close that gap between those communities where the speakers are and the people who are working to help them prepare high quality content. So I think, as I was saying early in the presentation, we have over 119 different languages that have been supported. And technology is the sort of closest, the last mile, because of the penetration of smartphones and other technologies in many of these places. So we're able to reach those teachers, particularly the teachers that write or speak that language and are able to produce those content. But I'm sure our colleagues from the other are able to add on to that. Thank you.
The only challenge I see, especially for minority languages, is the lack of a text-to-speech engine when it comes to persons with blindness and learning disabilities when they're going to use that. If you don't have a TTS, even if you have a script for the language, your device is not going to speak it back to you. So additional resources need to be pumped in, especially for developing text-to-speech engines, even if they can be low-cost text-to-speech engines, which might not sound very great, but engines like eSpeak, which is supported by NVDA, these can really develop options for different languages very quickly. If you have the developers, that can be done, and this needs a lot of funding. So if funding can be directed in this direction, I think we should be able to overcome this problem even for these minority languages.
Thanks a lot. Does anyone else have something to add on this? Maybe someone also who hasn't spoken yet who wants to give a comment on what is being discussed on underserved languages and the role of technology, the crucial role of technology as we've been discussing in these cases. Or challenges, implementation challenges. This is also a very big issue, which we will be discussing in the report.
I know we have Padam here from World Ed, and Padam, you guys are working with a lot of non-Nepali language groups in your project. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm Padam Mahar from World Education Nepal. Actually, we have not worked that much about the different languages, especially connected to the technology aid, but we are exploring how we can reach in the very minorities, because we have a high challenge here as a small country, but we have 123 languages. And a small segment of community is speaking a different language. Even in one community to another community, there is a high differences between the languages. So we are trying to developing some contents in different languages, especially the books and materials. But as of now, in the technology, that's what I was thinking, like how we can include it, as earlier Homir also mentions about additional resources may needed to include these all language component into the system that we are thinking about. Like, for example, the Devanagari script can be read out by many technologies, but inside, even in some contexts, we have not a script of those languages. So we are also thinking how we can include these things as well. So it would be good to know more about like the technology, like how we can include these the languages which have the script in the system. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
If I may answer your question about those languages without scripts, then we go back to the traditional way and use your human recorded audio as the alternative. The problem with human recorded audio is the file size becomes pretty high. So in low bandwidth areas, it's difficult to download. But if you can pre-install or share these files via conventional routes like USB and all that, then it's possible that at least for disabled children, print disabled children, you give them an option of having some content created, recorded, human recorded, and they can still learn. So that's an option.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I also noticed Patrick has his hand up, so please go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. That was more a question out of curiosity, because I got interested recently in the Global Digital Library, and I saw that it was allowing for translation, for crowdsourced translation. And I was wondering whether colleagues had some insight into quality assurance processes. Also because when you translate texts which have illustrations, for instance, you might encounter cultural conflicts or sensitivities that you would have to address. And so I was wondering whether there had been some technological development, maybe using blockchain, for instance, that had been put in place to ensure quality assurance in this kind of context.
Patrick, if I may answer your question again, it seems I'm overloading the session, but unfortunately, nobody else is speaking. So we, as Benetech, did do a project for the Zonka language for Bhutan, where we picked up titles which were in English and translated them into Zonka, and also provided a new feature within those digital books wherein there was translation, so there was text, and we also embedded audio, which was recorded in Zonka onto the same digital file. So children who could see would use their vision to read the same text, and children who could not see would have the audio which was embedded played to them and read the same content. And regarding the translation, it went through a 3-stage process wherein the Zonka speaking translators, first level, second level, and a third level translation check was done before they were released to the students over there in Bhutan. Does it answer your question, Patrick?
Yes, it does provide an example of a process that was followed.
Thank
you. Patrick, we don't have colleagues from GDL on here. So All Children Reading is partnered with GDL on the Begin With Books Prize, and all of our books go through a very rigorous quality assurance process before they're uploaded to the Global Digital Library. So that includes like full WCAG compliance with accessibility standards, also compliance with the GDL's leveling standards, and then we require the awardees to sign off on the contents, kind of the language appropriateness, the wording, all of that. I do know that when the books are crowdsourced translated, there is a gatekeeper before they actually go on the Global Digital Library that flags issues. So they don't just automatically go up there, even though you could translate them and have them in your personal library. So there's a difference between your own personal library and the public library. That said, our colleagues at World Ed, for instance, have flagged issues with books that are currently available that do have mistakes in them. And we're not in charge of the Global Digital Library, but we have flagged to them that we need to have a process to address those issues in those books, because it prevents uptake, like by the government, for instance. So I don't know if that's a full answer to your question. It's definitely worth exploring with Krister and the team at Global Digital Library, but that's just been our experience.
Thank you. No, it does help, and also it kind of highlights that we are going into this kind of use of technology, but there are also some stages where we could continue to improve leveraging technology, like in this situation where quality assurance is still something that's very manual and very reliant on people, and so you can have bottlenecks and issues in this regard.
Yeah, I will say the ACE tool, which I think Benetech, you guys created that, but the ACE tool checks for accessibility. So we use that fully and are grateful that there is a technology tool to check for accessibility, definitely.
All right, thank you everyone for your insights. I'm not sure how much time we have, but let's see if we can move on to maybe just another question. In terms of improving reading outcomes for early grade learners, are there any examples or insights that someone would like to share? I see we have 1 minute remaining. All right. I guess this is a discussion that can go on for a much longer period, and we definitely need more time for this. But we would just like to thank all the colleagues for joining this breakout session, and some of the key takeaways. At least we managed to discuss the section on disabilities and great examples coming in from India, from Nepal. Yeah, looking forward to continuing this discussion. Please feel free to engage with us and write to us and email us in case you have any other examples that come across and you would like to share them with us, and perhaps we can have a look. And thank you everybody for joining.
Can start. Hi everyone, welcome to this breakout group session. We will be focusing on access to content. So how to use technology as a tool for access, dissemination, and enhancement. In this group, you're joined by two Jam Report colleagues. So myself, I'm Laura Stepanovic. I work with the Jam Report team, and I lead the consultation process for the 2023 Jam Report on Technology and Education. And I also have my colleague Camila, who will introduce herself later, but she will be actually the researcher drafting the chapter on access to content. So she will have a lot of very useful things to share with us and very useful tips. Just to mention that the chapter is just being developed, and the purpose of this consultation is really to hear from you and from your experience on what examples you can provide on these important issues. So the idea is really to feature some of your innovations, some of your examples, and then use them in the chapter afterwards. The report will be available in June of 2023. So we still have a long way ahead for including all these comments. Very briefly, I'm going to go through the questions that will be covered in this consultation. I'll go through the issues that will be covered fast, and then I'll give the word to Camila to start going one by each of them. What I ask you is, please, if you take the floor to introduce yourself and your organization and give a brief introduction. Rather than doing it now for everyone, in the interest of time, I will ask just for those who are taking the word. So thank you so much. And with that, just let me go through the three issues that will be covered. We will be covering technology as a tool for access, dissemination, and enhancement. So how to expand knowledge to more learners in more attractive and cheaper formats. How technology can be used as logistical support for teaching and learning. And what modalities can we see for content development. Then we will jump into exploring open educational resources to see how ensuring access to knowledge that is free, open, relevant, and of high quality for all learners. And we will also have a closer look at open education resources in basic and tertiary education. And we will see the question that was raised by all children reading colleagues and how to overcome the barrier of large-scale adoption of these open education resources. And finally, we will explore the question of technology and textbook innovation and accessibility, how to promote accessible materials for people with blindness or visual impairments based on this Marrakesh Treaty. So with that, I will leave the floor to Camila to start going by the questions one by one. I will copy the questions in the chat and I will remove the sharing screen so we can see each other, and we will allow the interpreter to, it will be easier for Chris as well. So thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Camila, and I'm the researcher who will be drafting the chapter on access to content. But I'm not an expert on the topic, and you guys are the experts, so we might as well open the floor so to hear from you. Maybe we can start with the first topic, which was technology as a tool for access, dissemination, and enhancement. Do you just, again, as we mentioned, please contribute any examples, thoughts, feedback you can have on this topic?
So if anyone wants to take the floor and give it a first try. I know it's hard to be the first one, but we are really looking forward to hear from you. As Camila mentioned, you're the experts, and we really want to know your experience in different regions and on different themes of how to expand access to content.
Speaking again, for whatever reason, Chris, now Chris, every time I speak up, then he can see me. I'm having a frustrating experience because he could only see Camilla's video before he couldn't see the interpreter. It might be because the interpreter started speaking, and it might be an audio-based.
Should we turn off our cameras? Will that facilitate?
It might be better, the interpreter saying, I'm not sure.
We can give it a try. Thank you.
Would you all please repeat the particular issue we're sharing on right now?
Yes, absolutely, Camila.
Yes, so let's start with the first topic, which is technology as a tool for access, dissemination, and enhancement. So more particularly, how to expand knowledge to more learners in more attractive and cheaper formats, the logistical support for teaching and learning, and modalities of content development.
Do you want to give it a try, Paul, and share your experience?
Well, I'm thinking of a couple of experiences that we've seen using our Bloom platform during the pandemic, not necessarily all children reading projects, but similar projects in Guatemala. They had begun using Bloom and digital books. And during the pandemic, they were able to significantly expand access to digital materials, added to their collection. I think it went from 300 some odd books to 600 some odd books. It covers like 5 Mayan languages. And they've seen nearly 500,000 reading sessions. And one of the ways they were able to combine the Bloom Reader as an offline reader with other technologies was that they use WhatsApp and a WhatsApp distribution network to get books out to children during the pandemic every 2 weeks, attached to a WhatsApp message that they were then able to pull into their local reading app, and had significant uptake of reading materials across many areas of Guatemala, including in rural areas, and saw some reading gains on the part of the children who had received books that way. So that's one example of how kind of a combination of technologies pushed out books to children, even in the absence of a live internet connection, and were able to contribute to their ongoing acquisition of reading.
Thank you, Paul. This is really insightful.
It's Chris in here. Maybe I can add something that kind of follows on nicely from what Paul's just said.
Yes, please go ahead, Chris.
Cool. So yeah, my name's Chris. I'm from Curious Learning, and we're a group that has worked closely with the All Children Reading Grand Challenge, particularly the example that was shown up about some of the apps that were developed, including Feed the Monster, that was originally developed for Syrian refugee children. But one of the major roles we've played is optimizing the process of localizing it, making it extremely cheap to produce, multiple language versions thereafter, including extremely marginalized languages. And by doing that, you end up with a tool that can be distributed fairly rapidly. And much like WhatsApp was used in the SIL example in Guatemala, we've used social media and essentially digital advertising to just let people know that this exists in specific places. And that's where we've had incredible sort of distribution traction, including, for example, 100,000 Ukrainian kids are using the app within sort of 2 months of the invasion of their country. So there's a massive example, a massive advantage of having content that's sort of open source and Creative Commons and allows for rapid either localization and or replication. And that's not just the content itself, but maybe the underlying tools. And that's a way in which, can answer your question around, this as a tool for access and dissemination. We think of the tech as sort of a new medium, which allows different opportunities, all of which can be explored to see what can be optimized for early reading and education. So, maybe that's a helpful contribution.
Yes, thank you so much, Kristen. That's very helpful. I see that Matt has their hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Just before we move on, is everything okay with the interpretation video? Can everyone see?
Michael can see the interpreter. Chris has been struggling, and he has opened a second laptop, and everything seems to be good now. So he is going to go between 2 laptops, but he's figured out a way to see the interpreter.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, thank you. So Matt, go ahead.
Hi, I just emphasizing what Paul and Kristen said. There's also something very interesting about that we see in designing digital storybooks around universal design for learning, and also with open web standard technology. When we build the different means of accessing the storybooks, whether that's human narrated audio, the text itself in HTML, sign language video, those parts, if you will, all the different pieces of the book can be repurposed if they're built on open standards. So even the way that EPUB, which is the open standard for digital books, which is becoming a World Wide Web W3C standard, because it's built on that collection of open technologies, just as others were saying, you can repurpose the text and easily insert a translation. You can reuse the video, you can reuse the audio. And so we've had books that we originally developed, as a book to be delivered on an app, let's say on a tablet or a PC or by a web browser. We had that video and were able to repurpose it for television. During the pandemic, one of the ministries in Kenya asked us to launch a TV show. And interestingly enough, because we had that video in an open standard, it was, there was work involved, but it was fairly easy to repurpose. Same with the audio for radio and other formats. And then also, because the text itself is in an open web standard, there's a lot of tools. I don't know if our friends from Benetech are in this call, but a lot of people have done a lot of work, again, creating, because they're open web standards, a lot of work around accessibility has done, for example, converting HTML to eBraille. So if you build all the parts on a solid foundation of standards, there's a lot of tools that can be used to disseminate those parts and reuse the books, and they live on both for adaptation for others, but also for different, I almost hate to use the word platforms. I think that kind of implies proprietary technology, but just different ways, an eBraille reader that reads eBraille, a tablet, a phone, a radio, a TV. So I think there's a very interesting, crossover between the way that you design the materials and actually the technology itself.
Yes, thank you, Matt. That was an extremely relevant.
And it's very, and that was a very, I'll give credit to, a lot of people who've been doing accessibility research and work, on the internet for years and years and years. And if we build on that and pay attention to it, we sometimes think it's kind of new, but actually there's been a lot of work going on for a number of years. And there's a continuous thread, of both individuals who've been working on this in various committees, but also, the technology. So sorry to interrupt you, but thank you. Just wanted to
no problem.
Credit.
If I could just ask you if you have any websites or names or things, if you just put them in the chat so we can look them up later to have some more specific examples of these, like platforms or researchers on websites.
Exactly. So starting with I'll type it in
Yes,
WCAG. I think it's on 2. Let me just look it up right now. But
thank you. Yeah, if you could
start
type
typing.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I see there's a hand. Rajib, would you like to speak?
And Rajib, before you start, can I ask everyone to introduce your organization, please, and your region, so we know a bit of the context from where you're speaking?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Rajib, and I work for SIL Lead. I'm based in North Carolina, the U.S. It's really good to hear all your discussions. And one of the things that I think interesting that we're doing in Papua New Guinea is the All Children Reading, the UMI project, UMI Read Together project. SIL Lead is one of the implementing partners. And we're helping in this project to adopt more than 500 accessible books, and also creating some sign language local stories from the communities. And so the project is focused on the Western province, and which is the remote part of Papua New Guinea. And our partner, to make sure the content that we're producing is available on Bloom Library on the website, and anybody can access it with an internet connection. But the problem is, what if you don't have internet connection? And to reach those remote parts of Papua New Guinea, our partners is focusing on distributing SD cards with the contents and Bloom Reader loaded onto them. Although our main scope of work for this project is to help with the content development, we're also helping Save the Children to put those contents and Bloom Reader in a package on SD cards that are being distributed and will be eventually distributed in remote regions. And those can be loaded onto smartphones. Those are pretty handy and available. In some areas where there are not smartphones, our partners, Save the Children, is providing some smartphones, but a lot of the people have the smartphones available, and all they need is to plug in the SD card and start reading from those. So I think that's one way also to expand and do the extension of EdTech technology in remote areas where people can access high quality content.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. That's an interesting example and good point of how to reach learners that don't have access to high level technology. So thank you. Does anyone else want to share examples or initiatives?
Just to mention, Camila, that in the chat, there's been a lot of resources and examples that have been shared. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you so much.
There's a lot. So there's a parallel discussion going out in the chat. So thank you so much. If anyone wants to take the floor and expand a little bit on any of these examples, that would be excellent.
Hey.
Otherwise, we can I hear a voice.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Michael. I think the RIT team has, certainly inspired us and done a great job of actually engaging local communities. And I know Bloom does a lot of this as well with local languages. So I'll just say, I think there's a real challenge with OERs coming from, let's say the West or the North, pick your favorite word for, wealthier countries that have the funds to produce these. Someone's paying for the content development, someone's paying the salaries of the content developers. And a real challenge that we face, Ikitabu does a lot of work with local publishers and authors in Africa, is that OERs are actually seen and actually do compete with locally produced content in a very real way. In many cases, an OER project from, let's just pick the US because that's where I'm from, will have a larger budget than, it would be a great budget for a local publishing firm to produce, copyrighted content that sustains the livelihoods of local authors and publishers. And I just think Bloom and the guys at RIT have done, in the world around me, have done a really interesting job engaging local communities to produce that content. And I think we'd all see that approach as a path to sustainability for locally produced content. So I guess I'm maybe Michael, if you want to say more about, or Chris, how you've engaged local communities, particularly deaf communities, to create those stories. I think it's really interesting.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, that's actually one of the important points we hope to address in the chapter. So thank you for bringing it up. And yes, I just reiterate.
I'm saying that I put some information in the chat about that too.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. Yes, I see it.
Yeah, and Camilla, just for your framework, we have some great awardees on this breakout here. Chris and Michael have done great work, as is mentioned, in creating sign language storybooks. We have Amy and Alana, organizations who have done books for children who are blind. Maria Eleno has created books and a platform for children in Mexico. And Nejma has also created a book platform for really great storybooks in Arabic. So if that helps put some things in context for you about for your questions, just wanted to kind of give a brief introduction to who's on the call, if you want to target some of your questions to them.
Yes, that's great, Michelle. Thank you so much. And since you mentioned, would maybe Amy or Alana like to talk a little bit about the experience of developing content for the blind community?
Hi, this is Elena from Benetech. Our approach is a little different from what Matt and some of the others were saying about producing, brand new storybooks and content for local communities. Benetech does a lot of the conversion process of making sure that books produced, anywhere in the world, from the US or from other places, are accessible, particularly for people with blindness and other print disabilities. So what we've seen work really well is, as Matt said, to have those international standards of what it means to be accessible content, so that everyone is working from the same understanding and knowledge. And that doesn't mean it always gets done, but everyone has a place to kind of point to as what does it mean to have an actual accessible book? What does that quality look like? So that's a really great place to start. Thank you, Matt, for bringing that up. And then it's a combination of technology and manual resources to, I guess, to first of all, to educate producers of content on how accessibility can be integrated right when that content is being produced, the idea of born accessible. And I know several, Bloom and others on this call work a lot on that as well. And then if content does have to be retrofitted or remediated, whatever the word you use after the fact, that there are both technology and manual resources to do that. Benetech does a lot on the technology front, but it's not all able to be done yet automatically or via AI. We're working on that, but there's a lot of great work to be done in helping people understand how to write quality image descriptions, for example, so that those can be embedded in EPUBs or other story formats, so that both the text and the images are accessible. So a lot more to say, but I'll pause for a second. Amy, I don't know if you wanted to jump in.
Yes, this is Amy from Resources for the Blind in the Philippines. In our case, aside from...
Amy, we can't hear you very well. Are you able to get closer to your microphone?
How is it now?
It is a little better.
Oh, sorry about that. Anyway, here in the Philippines, of course, we have been, as earlier mentioned, we have been training teachers and parents, as well as, of course, students who will be using this technology so that they can access the curriculum and that they can actually be involved in their day-to-day activities in school, especially now that currently we just started the face-to-face but very limited. But the problem that we had before is that blind children have difficult for them to access Braille books. So good thing that we have Share, that we have Bloom books, so that students can actually have access to these books. However, from our experience, basically for blind children, having digital books is fine, but in reference to improving their spelling, it's really necessary for them to also have Braille books. So they have digital books or audio book, but at the same time, their fingers, their reading hands would have access to Braille books. So that's the problem that we have encountered before. So right now, when we are, because we are building our partnership with the Department of Education, we have motivated them, we continue to encourage them to make sure that these are available for children in the Philippines, especially now. And right now, we have connected with ABC Plus, which is providing also services for children who are deaf and blind in parts of the country in the Philippines. And they are also using Bloom Book, which is plus points for them because they will have access to reading materials, and they've been connecting with us to also produce Braille books so that blind children will also have access to Braille books. For our current project now with USAID under Gabay Guide for increasing access to education for blind, deaf, and blind children, we're working with people from the sector of the deaf, and we are currently providing them the curriculum. We have modified the provided curriculum for FSL, which is very important. And when we produce it in partnership with the deaf sectors as well as with the Department of Education. Because currently, the Filipino Sign Language is not yet widely used in the Philippines. And even the teachers in the Philippines really do not know how to use or not yet equipped to use Filipino Sign Language. I think Michael can say more about it. So in our case, as much as possible, we want to provide training for teachers working with deaf children on using Filipino Sign Language, as well as giving them access as to how to introduce Filipino Sign Language to deaf children in the country. So it's very useful also to, aside from coming up with the content, it's really, really important to involve the deaf sectors. If we're using Filipino Sign Language or coming up with a curriculum or coming up with books for them, it's really important to involve the deaf community. And then for blind people, it's really important to also have them part of the planning and part of the decision making. I think that's also it's also important to include the parents of parents of children with disabilities. We were always scolded by the sectors when we're working in the field. They were always telling us that, you know, you cannot do something for us without involving us. And it's also true for the parents. Parents in the Philippines would like their children to be successful in school, to be really involved in the school. But they were saying, why are we not included? You should also include that. So maybe when we introduce technology, whatever technology it is, when we plan on how the content would be available for children with disabilities, or how we can make it accessible for them, we should also consider this, the learner, the parents, and of course, the other members of the community who will be part of educating these children with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, for bringing up this important point. I see Michael has his hand up.
I would like to comment about the parental involvement as it relates to literacy, as Amy had just mentioned. Currently, we have a new project that I'm working with Chris on, where we're focusing about sharing literacy, meaning the parents who are often hearing, who have deaf children who do not hear, how can they use this stimulus to share the same reading book. And so we're starting to use rhyme, and we're starting to use other features and it's producing good results for the deaf children as they're improving their reading literacy before they actually enter the school system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Chris, would you like to add something?
I'm not sure if Chris, this is the interpreter, I'm not sure if Chris could see Michael's comment.
All right, so.
Gail, could you ask Chris if he would like to add something?
He does not seem to be attending right now, so I'm not sure if he can see the interpreter either. I'm asking him again. Chris is saying, I'm sorry, to be honest with you, I'm a little lost. I can't follow the discussion because I'm having issues as far as seeing people, but I know that Michael and Laura can share with you the information, the terrific ways that we are disseminating and reaching out to people within the countries in whom that we're working, using the platform that we're using. We're also using social media like Facebook, and technologies like that can also document data usage, and that's equally as important as disseminating the technology, because then you can see its use rate and its success.
Great. Thank you. And I'm sorry about the difficulties in seeing the interpreter. I think we will be sent back to the main room in a minute. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you very, very much for your contributions and for adding all of this interesting content in the chat as well. So thank you very much, and we'll see you back in the main room.
We really want to close by thanking the GEM Report team for holding this consultation to hear from you, our ACR GCD awardees. And also thanks to our awardees, thank you for sharing your rich experience. A couple of things to share with you about what's next, which is on the next slide here. If you'd like to submit additional research to the GEM Report team, there are several opportunities. And I know there was such rich discussion in our breakout groups. There's probably so much more to add. And I know there was also some complications with technology that didn't allow everyone to fully participate in the way that we really would love for, and hoped for. So here's a couple more opportunities so that your contribution can be considered by the GEM Report team. First of all, you can contribute to the online consultation by sharing your research and resources. Online consultations are available in English and Spanish and Portuguese. You can also share feedback, literature, examples of projects, innovations, and good practices on EdTech and data that can feed into the report by emailing them to Laura Stepanovic, and you'll see her email address there. On the next slide, I just want to also tell you about some of the follow-up we'll do from this. I'll send a post-event email to you with the links and emails like I've just shared with you that on that previous slide in case you didn't get a chance to capture them. I'll send that all out to you. We encourage you also to watch for an upcoming blog coming from the GEM Report, on the GEM Report blog featuring All Children Reading awardees. And we'll also make this recording available soon. We'll make sure to add captioning to all of it before we distribute it. As mentioned at the beginning, we'll be preparing a report that summarizes the discussion we had in this consultation, and we expect that to be available the end of June or 1st of July. If you haven't already, we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter on our website, allchildrenreading.org, so that you can be alerted when that report is available. As Laura mentioned at the beginning, the 2023 GEM Report, they're expecting to be available on June in 2023, so you can watch for it then. And in addition to that, there's also going to be 2 regional editions which will accompany it, one for Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So if we move to our very last slide here, just a reminder that if you want to learn more or join our community, we encourage you to check out our website or follow us on social media at the handles that you see here. In closing, from the All Children Reading Grand Challenge for Development Partners, which are USAID, World Vision, and the Australian government, thanks for your contribution today and your overall contribution to child literacy, and for sharing your expertise and experience today to contribute to this upcoming GEM Report. What you shared today can help guide and strengthen the efforts of others globally who are working alongside you and us and to ensure that all children are reading. Thank you very much.